Hey everyone, do you like your job, or is it more just bearable? Maybe a better question is, why do you stay? Maybe you're in that position where you get paid well enough to stay, but you wish it was more. Maybe your boss kinda sucks, or they're just a nuisance, but they really back in with that pizza party every Friday to make you think that they actually treat you fairly. Wouldn't it just be awesome if you just got a huge raise, or if your boss was fired? I mean, yeah, why wouldn't we want things to be better? But wouldn't it also be really great if your boss cut your pay in half? Well, the answer is maybe. In this hypothetical, you might be stuck in what's known as region beta, this purgatorial existence where things aren't obviously terrible, but things also aren't obviously amazing. Things are kind of just bearable enough to get by, but you don't really feel fulfilled or happy. And in order to escape this reality, things might have to get worse before they get better. Here's another example if that one didn't really resonate with you. This one's kind of like the classic region beta paradox that's given. Well, let's say that you're at point A and you need to get to point B, and anything that's a mile or less, you decide you're gonna walk. But anything that's over a mile long, you're gonna bike because it's faster. Well, what if your commute is 1.1 miles? Well, you said you're gonna bike, but because your circumstances got worse, i.e. your commute distance just got extended, your outcome is actually better. You're gonna get there faster. In other words, your condition has just improved because you have to travel a greater distance. Explain that one, science. So as I mentioned, this is what's known as the region beta paradox. It's this phenomenon that finds that sometimes humans are actually able to recover more quickly from more distressing situations than less distressing situations. This is because more distressing situations can trigger this psychological defense mechanism that is really only able to be activated when it meets a certain threshold of discomfort. Another example I really like is romantic relationships. If you're in a non-ideal romantic relationship, your interest in terminating that romantic relationship in order to find a more ideal partner is actually stunted by things not getting worse. You're essentially immobilized by the fact that things aren't terrible, but things aren't amazing either. This paradox was first introduced by Daniel Gilbert, an American psychologist at Harvard, and he says that this non-monotonicity, more on that in a second, applies to situations that don't meet the threshold for intervention. So if somebody's mildly injured, they're statistically less likely to seek recovery methods like going to get medicine or going to the ER than somebody who has an injury that is bad enough to meet that threshold, where they choose to intervene and do something about it. Here's a direct quote from Gilbert saying, "A trick knee hurts longer than a shattered patella, because the latter injury exceeds the critical threshold for pain and thereby triggers the very processes that attenuate it." Okay, now I want to go back and talk about that word non-monotonicity. Small math interlude, I promise it'll be quick and painless. In calculus, a function f defined on a subset of real numbers with real values is called monotonic if and only if it is either entirely non-increasing or entirely non-decreasing. But if you have a function that is increasing monotonically, it doesn't have to exclusively be increasing, it just can't decrease. To put it another way, if things are going up, they can't go down. If things are going down, they can't go up. As much as I would love to keep going into the math of that, I'm sure I've already lost some of you, so let's get back to the main topic. So if we don't set contingencies for ourselves, then we really can't expect to be liberated from our less desirable situation that we're in. I mean, I think the hardest thing about the region beta paradox is that there isn't a metric for how good things are. There's not like a FICO score that tells you if things need to change. That's kind of on you. There are some leading theories to this generally unknown reason as to why it's difficult to identify these situations, however. One is that our brains have just evolved to be more focused on the details of our environment rather than the general context. You can think to a survival situation where it maybe would make more sense to recognize the specific scent or markings of a predator rather than the generalized context of when they might attack. Another theory is that our brains really aren't good at encoding or storing general information. Abstract ideas are less concrete than detailed information. I mean, it's hard to remember anything general from that 2-hour-long ordinary differential equation lecture, but I can remember very specifically the look on my professor's face when I had to email him at like midnight saying that my portal to take my exam wasn't opening on my computer, so then he had to get on Zoom, and he was really upset because he had much better things to be doing than dealing with some idiot kid who couldn't figure out how to open the portal. And then he did open up the portal, and then I realized that because he had opened it, that meant I had to take it right then, but I hadn't studied enough yet. And then he just got really mad and he was really disappointed, and I had to email him telling him that I had totally failed that test because I didn't realize I was going to have to take it at that time. And our brains like to store information in a hierarchical way. Endel Tulving, the guy who kind of subliminally subliminally spoke on the region beta paradox before Daniel Gilbert, has said, quote, "Memory is a multi-store, multi-process system in which the different stores and processes are organized in a hierarchical fashion, with more specific processes and stores at the lower levels and the more general processes and stores at the higher levels." It makes me personally wonder about some people I know, or maybe people that you know, that don't really seem to evolve much in their life. And to be clear, this could be totally harmless. I mean, this could be somebody that doesn't really have another ladder rung to climb occupationally, or maybe it's somebody who is just perfectly happy in their convenient long-term relationship. But I just can't help but wonder if instead maybe they're kind of a victim of living in region beta. Like I said, it is really difficult to discern. I mean, I try to be really critical of myself in my own life and the situations that I'm in to decide if things need to be changed. But either way, it is just kind of a gamble. But I wonder if you were to explain this situation to the average Joe who kind of monotonously works at his cubicle every single day, would he change the path that he's on? But of course, there's kind of a reality to why people fall here. I mean, we can't ignore the very real fear of leaving a job, let's just say, and jeopardizing your income because you aren't sure if it's worth staying. Or maybe that relationship that you're in, there's kind of a quick and easy fix. Maybe you just have to adjust your expectations or figure out where your partner likes to keep their toothbrush and everything would work out just fine. Another very scary but real question I sometimes think about is, what are you supposed to do if you're in an obviously terrible situation, but you graduate up to something that is better than it was before, but not really where you'd like to end up? You could kind of say in a very twisted way that that's somewhat of a failure, because you might be more confused now than you were before about the satisfaction of your circumstance. And the worst part is you might be stuck there for a long time. In fact, you're more likely to be stuck there for a longer time. Your Brain's Not Broken by Tamara Rosier also kind of offers some interesting insight into this. Neurodivergent people typically attach feelings to situations. So their way of helping themselves remember the details of something is to recall the feelings or emotions that they might have experienced as a result of the outcome of some sort of circumstance they were in. But that makes things even more difficult for them if they live in region beta, because you don't experience intense emotions, and you would have a much harder chance convincing yourself to leave a situation. Here's a quote from Your Brain's Not Broken, where the author kind of compares the thinking of somebody who's neurodivergent versus somebody who's neuroconvergent, and they're using this analogy of a butler who lives inside your brain to kind of manage your ability to practice executive functioning. Quote, "The problem arises when individuals with ADHD have limited access to their prefrontal cortex. Their butler either is silent or has left town altogether. Instead of relying on the prefrontal cortex butler for planning, short-term memory, and impulse management, those with ADHD rely on the emotional centers in their brain to remember things, make decisions, and motivate themselves. They use emotions to think, react, remember, plan, and act." People with ADHD are kind of known to be job hoppers in some sense of the word, and unfortunately for them, they're more likely to leave a job in region beta for another job in region beta. It's not all dark and gloomy though. There's one potential solution I can kind of offer, which is to start looking at your life in larger, more general chunks. I personally suck at doing this, I will be honest with you, but I think it's a good exercise to try and assess your situation in a more broader context to see if things need to be changed. Maybe the more cliche way of putting this is to shoot for the stars, because maybe not settling is really the only solution that we have.